Well, the film Drowning is making its world premiere among this year's films at the ICFF Film Festival, which happens here in Toronto. And Drowning will premiere on June 15th at 2 p.m. at the Tiff Lightbox. Joining Jay, Brody, and I now are filmmaker Marco Veltri and actress Pardeep Bassi. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, let's start with... what is Drowning about?
Drowning's a slow burn psychological thriller where the lead character has gone through a lot of trauma in her life. So she creates sort of these delusions where she, finds a way out of that by breaking free from the people that are actually causing her harm. So she uses wish fulfillment to make herself believe that she can escape. And that's sort of how she builds up her self-esteem and empowers herself to get out of her situation.
And that is Laura Tremblay.
Yes.
Who has been on this show a few times.
Yeah, she's working. She's too busy. What are we gonna do?
Know. She's so popular, that one. Whether it's music or movies or... I guess here in Canada, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Right.
In the industry. And I know, Marco, you also do photography and all kinds of different stuff.
You kind of have to do everything. And depending on the job or the budget, when people say, do you do this? You say yes, and then you learn how to do it, or you've done it before, someone knows how to do it. And, depending on, whether you're micro budget or higher, you can wear less hats. But normally at the budget level that we're working at, you may not want to be a producer, but to start out, you have to be.
Right.
So a filmmaker, produce thyself is kind of the way it goes. And then people then build up from there. So one of the things that you kind of forget about, even on a small scale like this, is this film represents the work of 200 people. And they all wear multiple hats at different stages of the production.
It really takes a village.
Yeah.
And Pardeep, how do you fit into the film?
I play the character of Priya, and that's Anna's best friend, the lead character, Anna. And she's also been human trafficked, and she's in a situation where I think she kind of looks up to Anna in a way because she was able to escape that situation and maybe almost live vicariously through her. But she's a little bit, I don't want to say weaker, but she is a little bit more, she's a very scared character, she feels very trapped in her situation.
So how do you prepare for a role like that has some, really heavy elements to it?
I obviously read the whole script. I did some research on human trafficking as a whole and how our society is affected by it, and I looked into some of the stats, and it's really scary. I
think it's bigger than most people realize,
right.
and more in front of our faces than people realize.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's the most vulnerable people in our society that are targeted, like children, women. I know in Canada, it sometimes ends up being Aboriginal women. So I looked into things like that, and I almost try to put myself in that situation.
And so, Marco, tell us how the movie first kind of came about, and where did this movie start for you?
Well, we were actually working on a documentary on the topic maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, and that kind of fell apart, and we were left with the ideas and the images. And for me, it was sort of, what would this type of trauma, how would it affect someone? So we are sort of like the puzzle pieces of our childhood, and we learn how to love from our parents, and that sort of structures our life and teaches us how to love others. And what happens to you when that's taken away from you, and the people that you think are there to protect you are hurting you, and all of the the 4 or 5 lead characters, they are affected by trauma in different ways, and they respond in different ways. So it was a way of looking into that. And the trouble with that is, how do you make people watch that? Because if it's a documentary, it's too real and it's hard to watch. So we ended up making a very stylized film that ends up coming across as a thriller when it maybe didn't start out that way. And it really is a way of looking at things in a way that you can approach this topic where, some people turn away. So the hope is to kind of bring this, problem up in a way that is viewable and will leave people thinking about it afterwards.
Now, tell people a little bit about the ICFF, because we have so many different film festivals, but some are less known.
This is the ICFF, stands for the Italian Canadian Film Festival. And what it does, it brings films from Italy here, award-winning films made by filmmakers of Italian heritage around the world. And luckily for us, some of their mandate is to support local filmmakers who are also of an Italian heritage. So what it does is it brings these films to audiences here. And I think when I looked it up, it's like 1.5 million Canadians of Italian heritage. So that's a big market that they're able to bring these films to, and they put on a really big show. It seems like you might think it's a small film festival. You look at their list of sponsors and the fact that they're at the Tiff, Lightbox, and they've got a lot of people behind them, and it's just it's really great to be able to show the film at this film festival.
So will everybody go on the 15th? Is that the official?
Well, we're hoping. We have, I think, about 300 seats, and we know we've got. We're almost.
Sorry, when I said "will everyone go," I meant like the cast and stuff.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
mean. I didn't mean. I'm like, yeah, no. I mean,
percentage,
people will go to the movie, but I meant.
We have about 20, 25 speaking parts. And as far as I know, at least 20 of the actors will be coming. They're all from the local area. And, they're bringing their supporters with them. So we're hoping that, everyone can see themselves on the screen there.
And talking about, indie filmmaking and, micro budgets, what kind of choices do you have to make as a filmmaker to kind of work around the fact that you don't have the biggest budget out there?
Well, some people see it as a never-ending compromise, but you just have to take that and then accidentally turn it into opportunities. The simplest thing you can do is when you know you're working at like $100,000 or lower budget ranges, you start with what locations do you have access to? And normally they tell you to shoot in one house with 6 actors and everything has happened in that house. And that's the last film that I wanted to make. So we made a list. Well, I made it, I keep saying we. I made a list while I was writing of what I had access to and what we'd have to find, and sort of built the story around what was possible with a couple, moonshots. And somehow we managed to find the underwater spaces. We found the bigger locations, managed to follow our color themes of like red, white, and black, and even have art direction, which is sometimes unheard of in a micro-budget film. But we had a really great DOP and a great crew behind him, and just the ability to give the actors and the crew more time. That's one of the mistakes that happens on a micro-budget film. You try to do everything in 8 days.
Right.
But instead, I made the crew smaller and tried to shoot for more days. We ended up shooting for about 26, 27 days, which is
that seems almost luxurious.
It was,
small
but
budget.
I knew that this was something that I could only do once, and you'd be living with this movie for the rest of your life. So it was one of those things that, with the proper planning and with 15 or 20 years of, practicing doing other things and working with the right people, there's a lot that's actually possible. And most people that see the trailer and see the movie, they don't believe it's a micro-budget movie.
Yeah, that's true. It certainly looks like, and again, with a lot of indie films, you're right, you end up seeing 1 or 2 spaces. And it does seem like, even just in the trailer, it feels like you're kind of all over the place, which is amazing.
Pardeep, I got a question for you. You have a pretty interesting background. You used to be a runway model. Also, you do some work as a camera operator at Armstrong Acting Studios.
Yes.
What, and you can name them both. What did those two fields, what about those two things did you bring into acting? Has being a runway model helped you as an actor? Has viewing everything from the camera as a camera operator taught you anything about acting as well?
Sure. Well, I modeled for almost 4 or 5 years, and I still model sometimes. And I traveled for it. I would often go on contract. I went to different places in Asia. I lived there in model apartments, so I had that whole experience. I think the main difference between modeling and acting would be modeling is a little bit more, you have to show, there's a lot more strength, whereas acting, I think, you show more of yourself and your vulnerability and being able to tap into different characters, whereas both kind of tell a story, I think.
Yeah.
For camera operating, I really just wanted to I made the decision to just stay in Toronto at some point and pursue acting full time. And I thought camera operating would be like a really good way to just get just the behind the scene knowledge of all that.
Seeing the performances through the eyes of the camera as opposed to from a different position on the set.
Right.
Did it change the way you acted from then on or not? Did you notice anything?
I did. I think I would tape different actors, and you kind of see their little. You're able to recognize things you do yourself that are similar to other actors.
Mm-hmm.
You end up learning a lot from others, I think.
Fantastic.
Now, one question that we'd like to ask everyone on this show, and works particularly well when it is a film-based conversation, is what is your favorite movie of all time?
Well,
Pardeep, you go first.
I don't think I have one favorite. I have like this wide range of. I like anything from Wizard of Oz to Fight Club to. It's a big range.
For sure.
Yeah.
And those are both great choices.
Oh, I think for me, it's a mix of a lot of films. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, and maybe that's a podcast for later. But like there's movies that you carry with you and become your friends. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, my friend was named Lawrence Arabia, and E.T. and Dr. Zhivago and The Usual Suspects, and even then you make new friends eventually called The Matrix, and other films add on to it. So it's slowly you become influenced by almost everything that you see. But there's films that actually become your friends, and that's just because I'm a filmmaker. So for me, it's a very long list.
Yeah, I think we all have those certain movies that you kind of go back to, and if you're having a bad day, this movie makes me feel in this way that I find comforting, or when you need to be inspired, certain stories. And so I think it's always interesting to find what story, first of all, how people interpret the question, but then also, gives us a little insight into what stories really kind of resonate with people. Marco, if you could have made any movie besides one of your own, what movie out there do you wish was yours?
Well, I'm going to cheat on this answer because you get this asked a bunch of times. But for me, my favorite movie is the one that I'm about to make or the one that I'm about to write, because it just the possibilities are limitless. So I don't want to reach out and say I wanted to make Citizen Kane, but really because this is luckily enough what I get to do kind of sometimes. For me, it's the next project. What's the next idea that I really want to spend 7, 5, 3 years on? And,
right.
And you're always working on multiple things. As a project you're promoting, the one that you're writing, the one that you're raising money for. So the beginning, middle, and end, and you're kind of all over the place with multiple personalities. Like, oh my God, the film's finished, thank God. And then, oh no, we have no money for this other thing. So it's always this just cycle that I'm lucky enough to be in. So for me, it's really the one that I'm about to work on.
When people are listening to this and maybe they're going to be in Toronto on the 15th and they're thinking about it, what would you say to push them over the edge into buying those tickets to see Drowning?
I think that just to see something that's different, and just to see what a group of people can really do on a limited budget when they really believe in something.
Pardeep, what would you tell people?
I personally love movies that have a strong female lead, which this one does. And I think there's been, especially in recent years, there's been more of a shift, more of an openness towards that. And I think this is a really good example of that type of movie as well.
Oh, see, both great answers. Very different. Well, again, it is playing June 15th. 2 p.m. at Tiff Lightbox as part of the ICFF Film Festival. Where can people go to buy tickets?
They can go right to the icff.ca webpage and get them through the website.
And congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for your time. Thanks.
That is filmmaker Marco Veltri and actress Pardeep Bassi. And we will be right back